Let's start, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning if you are in the US. Good afternoon if you're in Europe, Africa, Middle East, or the Gulf area. Good evening if you're in Asia. I have nothing to say to our friends in Australia because they are probably sound asleep and I don't think they will be joining us today. Let's start today's webinar. It's the 5th in the series, so I can also see some old faces and old friends. Hello, Krzysiek from Wrocław. We've had a long history, but also newcomers. Very warm welcome to you. I hope this will be the first in this series of the webinars you participate. So the agenda will be quite simple. We'll start with discussing a little bit the costs of manual document handling and outdated systems. We'll go through use cases, and we'll finish with a short ideas for you how to get started with AI document intelligence in your companies. The webinar will last around 30, maybe 35 minutes plus a QA session. You can always ask a question by using the questions button, which is on the right bottom corner of your screen. So ask me any questions during the webinar or after I finish, and I will answer those questions towards the end. There is no need to take screenshots or record this, as we will send you all the material after the meeting. Let's get started then. Now, we are in the age where we have self-driving cars, we have AI agents doing a lot of manual work already. We're also planning to fly to Mars, but we are still running our offices and the documentation like it was the 1990s. We are either using manual document processing or some outdated systems. And this is causing a lot of trouble for employees, but also businesses as a whole. Now, if you think of who uses document management system, digital document tools the most right now, it's surprisingly mostly sales and marketing departments. I was convinced that legal and IT will use those tools more, but apparently legal and IT people are quite well organized. They have good memories. They think in structures, while people in marketing and sales are usually a little less organized. They are more free-spirited, so probably they need those tools more. So there is an adoption of digital documentation tools, but this is definitely below the expected level and quality of those tools. Now, if you look at the research, 73% of workers globally spend between 1 and 3 hours just trying to find information on a particular document. So it's up to 40% of your working time, which is a lot. And it's not only time consuming, but it's also daunting. Like if you use systems like Confluence, for example, finding documentation in Confluence is really complicated, and it doesn't really do the job. Globally, the costs of manual data entry errors is around 600 billion, which is a lot. Lost documents cost. Human error in manual document processing also causing a lot of rework and doing things over and over again. And if you look at the company level, we prepared this example where if you have 500 employees, each spending 1.5 hours of work every day, just searching ineffectively the documentation in the organization, it would cost you up to $7.5 million annually due to the time lost for all the employees. Now, if you're thinking of improving this situation, you have two choices. Right now, you can either build or buy a GenAI powered document intelligence tool. Now, there's always this question whether you should start with building or buying. Buying is simpler. It's usually cheaper because you're getting something that is ready in the market. Building is more complex and entails more effort. So usually companies start with something off the shelf, trying to achieve fast results with minimum effort, especially the business users love it because they don't have to involve their IT. But there is a certain level of configuration, customization, integration that off-the-shelf solutions cannot achieve. And when you need deep integration with your systems, where you have a lot of documents and specific business needs, specific workflows, probably an off-the-shelf solution will not do its job. Now, one more thing before I jump into the use cases, there's always a discussion between did and can. What I mean by that, some people talk about use cases that can be implemented, a GenAI that can do the work, potentially. But in our case, we're talking about real life use cases. So solutions that we have either implemented or are currently implementing for our customers. So these are real life examples of GenAI document intelligence. Let's start with the beginning of the journey. And the document journey often starts with customer service and inbound communication. What happens is that, especially in larger organizations, there is an inbound pipeline of messages incoming to customer service. This can go through email, Facebook, or forms on the website. There are multiple ways of contacting a company. And if you're a larger organization, like handling tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of email each month, then the sheer number and volume of messages, often including attachments, is overwhelming. Now, even the first step in this process, like classifying the emails and routing them to specific teams, is very difficult with such a sheer amount, not to mention OCRing the attached documents, which is not really well handled by traditional tools. So how do AI agents or AI solutions work in terms of incoming customer service messages? First, they can extract the data from the message. They can identify the client, the request type, and prioritize the incoming message. This is quite important because some messages can be more urgent, like, for example, when the customer is threatening legal action or they want to finish the service with the company. Those messages have to get a higher priority, and GenAI is perfect because AI understands the sentiment and understands the context and helps you flag those messages with higher priority. Now, then there's this automatic classification. If it's just an inquiry, if it's a complaint, if it's a request, etc. And those messages can be routed to specific departments or teams. In the meantime, also there's AI augmented OCR happening. The traditional OCR often makes mistakes because it doesn't understand the context. If the OCR solution is powered by and helped by LLMs, it understands the context, so it's much more precise. So even if there's a poorly scanned or photographed document, it should be able to do its job. Now, the next step is intelligent response generation. So if the question is standard, if it's in the database, the bot can answer the client directly. So if you're emailing a bank asking about the money that you left at the bank machine, the response will be automatic. We will get back to you within 72 hours after counting the money in the bank machine. Now, let me show you this diagram. If the case is not specific, not typical, it's very specific, then this message is not automatically sent to the client. It has to be checked by a human, maybe modified, and then sent to them directly. Now, things to keep in mind. Any solution in AI obviously needs training, so you need some past data. You need some documents to feed the RAG, for example, with procedures or term sheets, but also lists of past questions, and typical cases can be included in the database. Now, in terms of implementation, we consider that the simple proof of concept for this project is around 4 to 6 weeks, and the full launch for the application is 3 to 6 months. And the estimated costs are from 40,000 euros up to 100 or even more thousand euros. As you can see, the cost is not as high to justify those 3 to 6 months of work if you're thinking of a team working on it. But there's a time where optimization and fine-tuning of the solution is happening, where there's not so much work, but it still takes time before the solution can be launched. Now, we implemented this classifier autoresponder to one of the banks, which dealt with around 30,000 documents each month. And the initial results were very, very promising and stunning, really. They saved around 750 hours of a manual processing of messages. The reduction in processing time was around 50%, and 2/3 of certificate applications became fully automated. Certificate applications are those requests from users that ask for a document from a bank, like, can you confirm that I have a bank account with you? Now, 2/3 of those requests are automated. And over time, these figures improved because we constantly fine-tune the solution and optimize it so as to achieve better results. Now, what happens once you process these documents? You probably want to respond to the client, as we mentioned, but there's a specific part of document intelligence that deals with personalized language processing. What I mean by that, language used by agents, by employees, or maybe a legal counsel can be quite complex and heavy to understand. If you receive a letter from a bank or from an institution, is usually written in a language that requires a lot of effort to read, especially now that we have a very short attention span due to social media. We don't want to read long, complicated texts. Also, sometimes these messages are inconsistent and they are not clear. So what you can use to tackle this problem is a solution that simplifies and adjusts the language based on your company's needs. The messages, letters, communication, also in marketing, can be domain tuned or tuned to a specific brand that you have. So some brands are more optimistic and energetic, some are more serious and down to earth. So it depends on your brand, you would use a different language. The output is clean, structured language. You can also control the versions of different responses, so you can go back and see what the bot proposed and what was the change done by the person before sending it. Here it's interesting that this can be pretty easily deployed on premise, so on your own private servers, because you can use relatively small language models, not necessarily large language models, to run this kind of process, and you don't need extreme computational power to achieve this. So what would be the typical workflow? The user would upload the text, or it would be pulled from a system like the one we discussed before. The system would see a response either generated by the bot initially or by a human being. It would rewrite it to make it more simple and readable. Then the operator would review it, adjust it, and track the changes over time. Again, there are some things to keep in mind. For example, if you have limited training data, like your tone of voice, the level of simplicity that you want to achieve, it may require more on-the-job experimenting. So trying to fine-tune to optimize the solution to achieve the result. If you have a lot of training data, it's easier to build a backbone that would do this without much human intervention. Also, the quality and clarity are quite subjective, so you cannot quantify the results. And often in companies, there can be some disputes about the language that is being used. So it must be consensus-based to confirm that the solution is achieving acceptable results during testing. Again, those implementation times are similar. From our experience, in a small-scale solution can start with 25,000 euros for testing, and the rollout can be more expensive, but it's still within the range of 50,000 euros in an enterprise context. Now, again, we built this solution for one of the banks. It included, first of all, very simple things like grammar, spell checking, and stylistic adjustment, also tone of voice and readability. And it was deployed using Bielik, which is a language model we at Deviniti also helped to build. So we know it pretty well, and it's very well suited for this kind of purpose, specifically in Polish language where we use that. Okay, so we handle documents that are incoming from clients. We stylized the responses in those documents, and we styled the language in the documentation that we are producing, whichever it is. Now, let's see how those existing documents that we already have in the system can be used in a document intelligent system, or how users can use them. So, in general, as we know, manual processing of documents is very costly, it's ineffective, it's boring, it's tiring, and many of us would like to do something else rather than to search documents, check if different documents have the same content or the content is different, which of these documents is valid. So to be fair, those document intelligence solutions based on internal documentation can be used across the company in different departments, from legal through finance, sales, HR, procurement, and so on, wherever there are multiple documents to be processed every day. And now, the simple workflow of that kind of document intelligence solution is that first you upload the documents, then there's an AI-powered analysis, so we can extract key terms, figures, risk indicators. To be fair, the possibilities are endless. It's just a matter of optimizing the solution for a specific purpose. So you can analyze key deliverables from a long RFP document, or you can look for inconsistencies in technical documentation, or you can go through legal documents, which I will show you in a moment. So this is a top level overview of the process that is involved here, from a little bit more of a technical perspective rather than user perspective. The interesting thing is here again that this processing of documentation, summaries, extraction of keywords, comparison can be done using smaller language models, which I mentioned before. It's cheaper. It can be implemented on premise. It doesn't consume so much energy, so much tokens, so much computational power. So please bear in mind that a lot of the solutions don't have to use ChatGPT 4.40 or higher. These can be much simpler models that we often apply in our projects. Also, the results can be either in a custom-built front end, but they also can be structured in a JSON format, for example, and sent to a different system with JSON. So it's also important that it doesn't have to be a front-end solution. It can also be a back-end solution, a back-end solution that integrates with other systems. Now, of course, we have some issues to take into consideration. The data quality is very important. Bear in mind that many of the projects with document intelligence components rely heavily on preparation of data, cleaning the data, chunking the data. And if you look at the list price or the cost of a solution estimated by your vendor, you may think, where does the price come from? And a lot of this work often entails just managing the data before even it can be sent to a GenAI solution. So please bear in mind, the more documents you have, the more complex they are, the more inconsistent they are, the larger the scale of the project. But I would always encourage you to start slow, to start small, to do the first iteration. You can get a very cheap demo or even free demo using 50 documents. Then you can scale up to a proof of concept where you would involve more documents, and the full-scale implementation will cost you more, but it will include all the workflows that you require and manage the data in the way you require. The solution I would like to show you that we built is quite specific because it was built for legal purposes for local government. So the use case here is that school managers, school principals, or school administrative directors deal with a lot of contracts. Now, those contracts are often complex, and there are many of them. These are supplier contracts, like from utilities companies or cleaning companies, but they also can be from clients, like when you rent out your gym to a sports club, you also need to sign a contract. And the problem is that in those schools, the principals usually first sent this contract provided by a third party to their legal counsel or to a legal firm where this was analyzed. And this is costly because every time you have a legal team look at your document, they charge you for that. So the solution we built is quite effective in analyzing contracts based on some predefined criteria, identifying red flags, deal breakers, banned clauses, and so on. So once a contract is uploaded to the system by the school principal, they get a list of different comments already in the system. And even before they send it to the legal team, they can go back to the supplier and say, we don't agree with those clauses, and they can provide an explanation. So it really cuts the cost down, and there's much less back and forth exchanging the information about the emails. It's also structured in a way that it can be used with chatbots, so you can converse with those documents as a user as well. And the fourth case is actually a sort of umbrella case because it's a large enterprise knowledge AI system that we are building. It deals with over 20,000 existing documents in a enterprise, in a bank. It deals with company-wide documentation. So it can be anything from contracts, HR, compliance documents, sales documents, and so on and so on. And AI is just a part of that solution. So the system in itself is a much larger solution, but it has a significant AI component to it. So generally in large organizations, the access to information is inefficient. It requires checking multiple systems. It's time consuming to navigate between those different systems, CRMs, ERPs, DMS, and so on. So the challenge was to integrate all these data sources, normalize the data, prepare it for AI, and then allow users for simple access company-wide. So the user-facing capabilities is an AI-powered search engine, conversational chat assistant, which allows you to chat with a document. There's a source attribution, so you always know where the information that you are looking at is coming from. There are suggested questions that can be asked in a specific context or use case. And there's also an answer rating system to help you improve the solution in the long run. Here, the big challenge is always integration. If you're building a large-scale system that will cost you hundreds of thousands of euros in total, you're thinking of multiple data sources where multiple personnel is involved, and it also touches upon security, governance, IT departments who all have to confirm that what you are doing is legal, compliant, secure. So it's really good to have them on board from day one rather than to include them in the conversation later on. So here again, there are some quick wins, but in general, those implementations are longer. It's 7 months in this case we are talking about, but it can be much more. And I will show you a couple of screens on how this solution works. So for example, you have a screen, it's a user facing screen, an employee facing screen. The employee logs into the system and he has basically a chatbot where he can ask any question about any information in the organization. Imagine this. You can ask a question about any document in the organization. Of course, if you are authorized to view this document. If you're not authorized, you will not get the answer. But if you're authorized to see that document, then you will get an answer. So there are some frequently asked questions for it can be based on the context. So if you're a user frequently asking about products because you're a salesperson, then some of the predefined questions would be relating to sales. There are some popular files or tags that are often used in your context or in your department, but then you can engage in a conversation with the bot about any issue or any information that you are requesting from the document intelligence system. So as a bank employee, you can ask what's the card's cost, and the bot could ask you, which cards do you mean? Is it silver, gold, or standard? I mean gold. Then the bot explains key features about the card and also gives you the sources on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, it displays the document that you can scroll through and confirm if the information that you received is actually valid. There are some other similar questions that can be asked to that document. So once you finish the conversation about your specific issue, there are some other questions. So if you're a salesman and your client asks you how can I cancel the card if I don't want to use it anymore in the future, you can just click the button and you will get a similar reply as previously, referring to this document or any other document that would be in the system. You can do a general search in the documents, so you can ask about terms and conditions, gold credit card. Now, as you can see, there's an error here. It says terms and conditions spelled together, but this is on purpose because the solution can manage those kind of errors similarly to ChatGPT, who understands the question even if it's not correctly stated. And if you ask this question, it gives you 6 or more, 6 in this case, documents where this information can be found. So it's not a chatbot, it's not chatting with a document, but basically finding a document augmented with LLMs. So it's a very powerful enterprise-wide AI solution. Now, you may want to think, what is the next step for you or your organization? Of course, there are many approaches. Some companies have long-term visions and strategies of how to implement a solution. But surprisingly, even those large enterprises often are still in the sort of evaluation and experimentation phase. They don't have a clear roadmap. They are interested in AI. So what we offer are 2 basic approaches. One is hackathons that we organize. It's part of this innovation pipeline where you start from the bottom up. So you would invite your regular employees to the process, have a hackathon with them. And once they generate ideas, find problems and then generate ideas how to solve them with LLMs, you can prototype these solutions, test them. So maybe out of 70 ideas, you test 8 solutions, and maybe out of those 8, 2 go into production. And we do this, and it's very efficient. It's a little bit time costly, and you need to be ready to organize this kind of event and process in your organization. But it's very useful if you want to find specific use cases, and the best ideas are then implemented live. And this is our experience. The other one is more traditional process analysis, where you break down key processes, find where the employees avoid work, spot the shortcuts, and then remove the needs for those workarounds, because people always do workarounds. They try to do things quicker. If you identify where they do those workarounds, you can automate those workarounds. And this is more or less it for today. I see that there are some questions. Let me just check. Andrzej. Hello, Andrzej. We also go a long way. How do you manage document permissions? Is there a dedicated bot for specific users with access to certain documents, or can you query all documents within the organization with responses provided based on each user's document permissions? Let me break down this question quickly. No, there's not a specific bot. Usually it's a permission-based solution. So we can also mimic or mirror the authorizations from a different system. So for example, if you're using Atlassian software, users have different levels of permissions, and we can copy those levels into the solution. So it's a little bit more complicated than like a straightforward implementation where everybody has access to everything. But for compliance reasons, there's usually no other way to do it. Of course, you can build a dedicated bot for different users. Again, it's case by case. In some cases, it might be more efficient if there are two completely different processes, 2 completely databases. This can be done in that way. Leonard, how do you work with IT, compliance and security teams? Is it tricky to get them on board? It usually is. Like, people are, I think, reasonably skeptical about GenAI. It's still a new technology. People are still trying it out. I'm not sure how to work with it. So security specifically and compliance departments really need to rubber stamp the solution, especially in a large organization. But also there are two types of different implementations. There are implementations which deal with very sensitive data, like personal data, financial data, medical data. Then you have to really have compliance on board, or even kick off this project. If it's a more general documentation that we are dealing with, like sales documents, maybe it's not so important, and they can just confirm later on that they allow you to just pull the documents from the solution. But the general rule is to have them on board as soon as possible. And another question from Leonard: can these projects be reused? If it works in one team, can you just copy to another, or do you have to start over every time? In principle, you can copy some of the components, like use the work you did before. If you have some containerized parts of the system, you can reuse them for other purposes, some like basic engine or front end, etc. But again, there's a lot of data optimization, data chunking, data preparation before these solutions can be launched. So you can reuse some, but this will always be a custom project anyway, so that you get the right responses, so that the responses are fine-tuned to your users. You have to do it. I see that there are no other questions, so thank you very much for participating, and we will send you all the material later on. Please look out for the next webinar in April. We will let you know when it's coming in the email, and have a great rest of the day or evening or night. Thank you very much.